Hey everyone, welcome to class. Today we will continue strengthening our drawing skills through rendering. Last week, we learned about the importance of coordinating between the arm and the wrist to improve our drawing technique. Make sure you watch that episode before continuing with this one. So, what is rendering? That is actually a really hard question because rendering has a ton of different definitions. When people talk about rendering in art, they often mean reproducing or representing something. So the rendering techniques an artist would use to represent something would depend on what they're trying to depict in their artwork, such as texture, color, subject matter, etc. Rendering is a really broad subject with so many different applications, but we'll save that all for another time. What you need to know for today is that the key to unlocking all these things is control over your tool. So for today, the rendering technique we'll be exploring is shading with a pencil. We will be doing some rendering exercises to build control through consistency, layering, and pressure as we try to shade as evenly and smoothly as possible. The goal is for you to master your tool so that you can successfully render whatever you want to depict in your artwork. So here's what you'll need for today's lesson. For today's lesson, you will need a printout of this episode's worksheet and a regular pencil. For today, I recommend using a regular pencil instead of a mechanical one because the lead in a mechanical pencil is really thin and it doesn't give you much to work with. You can grab an eraser if you want, but today you might not even need one. The goal of today will be to work slowly and precisely to build up that control over our pencil. Now let's get started with our worksheet. First, we are going to practice consistency in rendering tone. Use your pencil to fill in the first shape at the top of the page as lightly and as smoothly as you can. Shading lightly actually requires a lot of control because you have to hold yourself back from making the lines too dark. The challenge will be getting a consistent, even tone with no white gaps between the pencil lines. And make sure you stay inside the shape. For the next shape, fill it in as dark as you can, but don't let your strokes get too wild. Try controlling your pencil by using smaller strokes. You want a nice, even layer without expending too much energy. For the last shape, fill it in with a medium tone. You don't need to hold back as much as you did with the light tone, or press down as firmly as you did with a dark tone. It should feel a little more comfortable, but you still need to control the pencil to get a consistent shade of medium gray as you try to stay within the shape. Here's a helpful tip. Change the direction of your lines according to the shape of the object to help you stay within it. Don't rush through these exercises. Whether you're working with a light, medium, or dark shade, it's important to focus on getting your tone as consistent as you can. On the next section of the worksheet is a value scale. In art terms, value refers to the lightness or darkness of a color on a scale from white to black. In the first row of empty boxes, let's try matching the values of the value scale. We will be doing this with layers. We're going to leave the first box blank because white represents our lightest value on our value scale. For the second box, try to match the value of the box above it. Start shading it in very lightly. Use even pressure to keep the tone consistent. And try to match the value with just one layer. Now let's try to match the medium gray value. Even though it's darker, just use light pressure again to fill in the box. Add a second layer, also using light pressure. Every time you add another layer, the tone should get a little bit darker. You should still be balancing consistency of tone and keeping your pencil lines within the shape. I want you to observe for yourself how many layers you will need to match the value. This will just depend on the amount of pressure you use. Do the same for the last box. The temptation here will be to rush through the process. You might be thinking, why do I have to shade so lightly for a black box? First, building up your layers slowly and patiently is a great way to avoid overshading. For pencil, it's always easier to add a layer than it is to subtract a layer. Second, the time and care you put into rendering will be evident in the final product. Even though we're adding multiple layers, you can see the history of your mark making. Each layer should be done well so that you end up with a beautiful smooth tone. Since regular pencils are gray, you won't be able to get it as dark as the worksheet, but that's okay. You can stop when the box won't get any darker. For the next set of empty boxes, let's try matching the values of the value scale, but this time using just one layer with different amounts of pressure. Let's leave the first box blank again, since it represents our lightest tone. Shade in the second box very lightly to match the value of the light gray box. Find the right amount of pressure you need to match the value in just one layer. Don't forget to shade evenly and keep your lines inside of the box. For the next box, use more pressure. Press down more firmly than before and try to match the value with just one smooth layer. You have to really control your pencil to get it just right. Be careful not to get it too dark, because it's hard to go backwards if you make a mistake. For the last box, use a lot more pressure to get the tone as dark as you can in one layer. And remember to not let your pencil lines get too wild. Use short strokes to conserve your energy and control your pencil. Let's take a moment to compare these rendering exercises. You probably noticed that rendering with just one layer is way faster than rendering with multiple light layers, but it can be tricky to perfectly match the value in just one go. On the other hand, rendering with multiple light layers can really test your patience. But if you slowly and patiently build a good foundation for yourself, there's a good chance that your tone is really smooth and consistent. For our last exercise, we will try combining both pressure and layering to achieve a smooth gradient. In art, a gradient is a gradual transition. So instead of filling in individual boxes, we'll be filling the whole box with a smooth, gradual transition from light to dark using our pencil. Leave some white space on the far end, since we want white to be our lightest value, and start shading in the box very lightly. As you make your way toward the middle and the end, slightly increase the pressure, but don't rely on this first layer to get all the way to black. Think of this as that good foundation we will need to build up the darker shades of our gradient. When you've reached the end, go back to the lighter side and add another light, even layer. If you start noticing that your tone is getting too dark, just use less pressure. Keep an eye on your value scale to guide you and build up your layers gradually. Keep adding pressure as you get towards the middle and darker end of the value scale. You should reserve the most pressure for the darkest part of the value scale. Go back to touch up any areas that need it. What you should end up with is a smooth, gradual transition from light to dark. We shouldn't be able to distinguish where one value ends and another begins. So how did it go? Was it challenging to adjust the pressure as you move from light to dark? Was it challenging getting your layers to blend together seamlessly? If anything, it probably required a lot of patience and concentration to balance layering, pressure, and consistency in your rendering. Just like everything else, rendering is something that can become easier the more you do it. It may not seem like it when you're first starting, but rendering with a pencil can be a really relaxing and even meditative process. I like to just put on my headphones, play my favorite music, and get into the zone. It's a great way to slow down and relax, and the end result can be so satisfying if I'm patient enough to get there. I encourage you to try the same. Remember, there are so many ways to render artwork, but it all starts with being able to control your tool with accuracy. So put on your headphones, keep practicing your rendering skills, and I'll see you in the next class.